When, where and who, but the how and the why remain a mystery. How did a man on home detention with an ankle bracelet arm himself with a shotgun? Parts of downtown Auckland remain cordoned off this morning after the deadly construction site shooting, which claimed 3 lives. It was a shocking event, 40 minutes of horror, much of which we saw played out live here on AM. Here are the key points that we know this morning. 24-year-old Matu Tangi Matua Reid, using a pump-action shotgun, opened fire at a downtown construction site at around 7:20 yesterday morning. Reid was on home detention for domestic violence offences. He was allowed to work though, and he was wearing an ankle bracelet. He was fatally shot by police. 2 other people lost their lives and 10 others have been injured, including a police officer. The names of the victims haven't yet been released. Last night, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins announced an inquiry which will be looking into the offenders management by the Department of Corrections and how, while he was on home detention, he was able to get a firearm. Joining us now in studio is the Police Minister, Ginny Andersen. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Now, in 2021, Matu Reid, he was serving a community sentence when he strangled a woman, broke a bone in her neck, kicked her in the head as well. Why wasn't he sent to prison?
Well, first of all, Lloyd, I just would like to acknowledge those 2 New Zealanders who lost their lives yesterday and acknowledge their families, that those people went to work yesterday and they did not return home. So I think it's only right for me to acknowledge that loss. And I'd also like to just acknowledge quickly that what police did yesterday, that the bravery of those officers who went into that building, the quick pace in which they were on the scene, I have no doubt that that saved lives yesterday.
I think we all are impressed by that. Just back to my question, why wasn't he sent to prison? Why was he allowed in our community when he had such a history of violent behaviour while he was, you know, on a community sentence?
And all people will be wanting to know those answers right now. I get that. But what happens now is we will have a full inquiry to gather all of that information and piece it together to understand exactly what happened here. You must have been asking these questions though as Police Minister. Most definitely. I'm very interested to understand how this individual got their hands on a gun. Have you had any answers? We will be finding it out. So the police investigation will go through all of those steps, and in addition to the police investigation, the Department of Corrections will also be going through to make sure that there weren't any flags that were missed. So whose call was it for this guy to be on community detention? Was it the Department of Corrections? Was it the Probation Board? Was it the courts? Was it police? Was it ministers? There will be a range of decision making, and it's just too early, Lloyd, to be understanding what were the factors that were taken into consideration. We get a lot of information at the start of a tragic event such as this, and it's really important that we go through it piece by piece to make sure we don't end up seeing this again. Yeah, and I guess that's the concern, is that people, you know, we're sort of dealing with what happened yesterday. Now we're looking at some of the details of this offender, and we're looking at his violent past, and he breaches parole conditions last time, or his community detention conditions last time, and committed assault, broke a bone in his victim's neck, kicked her in the head. His punishment was community detention, and he was allowed to go and work, and he was being monitored electronically. Do you know where he got the gun from, and can you use GPS to find out where he got that from? Those are all really good questions, and they're the types of questions that the detectives who are investigating this crime will be working on right now, piecing together all of that information to understand what those gaps are. I will say that now that we have a gun registry that's live in New Zealand, that went live on the 26th of June of this year, we now had 11,000 weapons already registered in that short time. So we do have a solution in place to keep track of people who shouldn't have weapons and make sure we keep weapons out of the hands of criminals. Is there any way that he could have got this legally, this firearm? That will have to be taken into consideration as part of the investigation. Now, your government, it's been called soft on crime for a long time now, and while most of it can be kind of brushed off as political posturing by the opposition, all of that stuff, doesn't this incident prove though that maybe the system has been too lenient, it's been too forgiving, and there are dangerous offenders who are out there in our community? People do want answers now. I understand what you're asking, but we really need to get all of that information in front of us before we can accurately say what went wrong here and how we can strengthen the system to make sure it doesn't happen again. Are we putting too many dangerous people like this, instead of putting them in prison, we're putting them out in the community on home detention? You'll have to look at each of those circumstances. I can tell you that the decreases in prison numbers we've seen, the main offence types are for low-level drug use, such as cannabis, and traffic offences. That's been the large decrease of those people in prison. So those people who are committing violent offences are still receiving prison terms.
Apart from this guy, because that was a violent offence that he committed in 2021. You've got to admit that was pretty violent, you know, strangling someone, breaking a bone in their neck, kicking their head.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I want to know the answers to those questions too, but that's why we need a full investigation to make sure all of that information is correct before we can start pointing out where the system could have been better.
How well did police know Matu Reid?
I don't have that information with me, I'm sorry.
Okay, so have they given you a briefing at all on this offender? Surely as Minister, you know, this happened yesterday and you would have been shocked just like the rest of the country, but you're the Police Minister, you'd want answers straight away. Did you go to the Commissioner and say, right, give me a dossier on this guy, I want to know what's going on? So
as soon as the event was unfolding, the Prime Minister and I flew to Auckland yesterday and immediately met with the District Commander and also the Commissioner of Police, and they walked us through the history that they knew of this individual, and we were able to ask questions specific to the incident.
Okay, so you've got answers, you just don't want to share them publicly yet?
All of that information at the beginning of a crime scene is being pieced together, so it's really important that police can verify that. Police were on the site yesterday, they interviewed over 80 witnesses, and the process now is to corroborate that evidence and to make sure it is accurate.
Can we talk about gun control laws? Because we've got pretty strict gun control laws in New Zealand. Are you going to look at these?
What's important to be done first is to understand what went wrong here. So we need to understand from the investigation, from police and also from corrections, where the failure was in order to understand how we strengthen the system. Okay, so there's not going to be any, you're not going to come out and just make any decisions off the cuff, you're going to wait for the inquiry. Do you have a time frame for that? I understand exactly what you're saying, but it's really important that we gather that information first. It's too quick, it's just too early to be able to say now that we're going to launch a full inquiry about weapons. We need to understand what went wrong here first. Just finally, there will be people who are watching yesterday, including me sitting in the studio and seeing these live pictures unfold of gunshots and police officers covered in blood. There will be people who are scared and are worried and thinking New Zealand isn't a safe place because things like that can happen. Is it a safe place? Are we losing that kind of aspect of our country? I want to reassure New Zealanders that was the first question that I asked the Commissioner, and they have been integrated into the whole FIFA response. That scene is now clear in terms of protecting it, and police with extra police presence on the ground in Auckland over the next few days to make sure everybody in Auckland, the CBD, is safe. And right across the country, I'm guessing, as well? Well, the focus has been right now for police in Auckland because we've had a significant event. So the main focus has been to make sure last night went ahead without a hitch, and it's been fantastic to see that people came out and enjoyed the game, even though that we had such a tragic day. Thank you very much for your time. That is Police Minister Ginny Andersen.